Welcome to the Youth Sport Podcast. My name is Rianna Poskin, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly within youth sport. It feels great when a kid comes up to you and says, "Coach, because of you, my life changed in the best way." It would feel awful to hear that because of you, the coach, a kid doesn't want to have anything to do with it ever again. I believe that kids deserve to have fun, to learn, to grow, to compete, and to play in a great environment. Join me as I interview guests that spill the tea on youth sport in order to help you make an enormous impact with kids right now. This episode of the Youth Sport Podcast is brought to you by Lululemon. I am part of the Lululemon Collective and will receive commissions when you shop through my link. Buying something for you or your loved ones, like my favorite warm down joggers, helps me to continue to bring interesting and empowering conversations for everyone. I have to tell you, when I'm coaching, I want to make sure that I'm dressed appropriately, I'm comfortable, my clothes stand up to all kinds of random situations, and that I have pockets. You never know who's going to ask you to hold something for them or what random things you need to carry with you. The Lululemon warm down joggers take care of all of my needs. I invite you to find your go-to item by browsing through the entire Lululemon site. You won't be disappointed. Please use the link provided in the video description below to start shopping. Welcome back to another episode of the Youth Sport Podcast. Today I have Fred Zinkie with me. Fred Zinkie is a high school phys ed teacher, a high school football coach, and a sports writer and podcaster with articles written for MLB and Yahoo Sports. His current podcast is the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Fred grew up playing lots of sports, but nothing too serious until playing AAA hockey as a teenager. His story of assessing what it takes to get a phys ed position in a high school and deciding to stand out in the recruiting process by getting his Master's of Education in Coaching Studies from the University of Victoria is just one example of how Fred shows his determination in setting a goal and figuring out the steps to achieve it. And that's going to be something that we're going to talk about today. We'll talk all about Fred's story, his knowledge in coaching kids, and his advice for youth coaches. But first, I'd just like to tell a quick story of Fred's character. 8.5 years ago, I was pregnant with our second son. I went into labor and called for my dad to come hang out at the house with our other son, but it looked like he wouldn't be there for a while, which is stressful. So we called our friends the Zinkies. Although Fred was working 2 full-time jobs covering MLB news reports and teaching, he grabbed his computer and came over right away, which obviously relieved a lot of stress. So it's the little things for some that are huge for others. And that was huge for me. And you may not know that. So thank you. Fred does these little things all the time in order to make others' lives better and to make an impact. So first of all, I would like to say thank you for not letting me have my baby at home. And
yeah, no problem. I didn't remember that story. I do remember it now that you brought it up. If someone had asked me the other day, have you ever gone to someone's house to help them go have their baby at a hospital? I'd be like, no, I've never done that before. But I do, now that you brought it up, I do remember going over there. And that was, like you said, 8.5 years ago was a little early for people to just be going over to people's houses and being like, so what's your Wi-Fi password? And like that's something people do all the time now. But back then I was like, okay, sure, I can cover your house. What's your Wi-Fi password? I can sit here as long as you want.
Yeah, I have to work. I have to do some stuff, but yeah, I can come. Yeah. So I wanted to also, if you can, start this podcast off with a story, because I thought it was really incredible what you were doing during that time period. And one of the stories, it's going to stay with me forever. Can you talk about the time where you had to go into Toronto? So you're working part-time, I believe, in the high school because you took some time to balance everything. And then you had to book it to Toronto, and then you had to do some like 5-minute segments. Can you just talk about what that was like? And, you know, the one thing that I do remember is you not wanting to take off your sport coat because you were sweating too much. So
oh yeah, that's dicey. Baseball season's a hot time, isn't it? So one season, that was the 2017 season. Part of my job that year was to go to the Rogers Center twice a week and do these like baseball hits, they're called, down on the field around 3:30 or so in the afternoon. So I'd leave school, I'd get on the GO train, because you didn't want to have to drive out of the city, and I take the GO train in, and for being on TV, you just have to look good from the waist up. So I'd always had on a dress shirt and tie, and a sport coat, and then just jeans or whatever on below that. So I'd put those on, but it was fine in April and May, but man, it would get so hot in July. And the GO train's like semi-reliable, but if it was delayed or anything, yeah, I'd have to like really book it to get over to ride. It's like, it's not far, but like just like whatever, it's maybe like 800 yards or something, but in the July heat, dressed up. So yeah, there'd be times when I'd get there and I'd be sweating like crazy, or running back to the GO train to get on it to get home quick to try to help with the kids at home. Yeah, I'd be sweating like crazy. Yeah, it was like just where I felt like I was wearing at that point in my life like so many hats during the day, teaching all morning, and then writing, and then hop on the GO train, and then do this quick 5 or 10 minute little TV segment, and then get back on the GO train, and then get home and be a dad and write things in the evening. And I was like grabbing free minutes wherever I could get them. It's like the whole thing was just a blur. And then you'd get down to the Rogers Center, and you get down on the field, and you'd be like, yeah, like I totally fit in here. Yeah, this is what I do all the time. And like nobody knows when you're down there that you were just teaching kids how to play badminton like 2 hours earlier, or you got to run a kid to hockey practice or something like as soon as you're done. And there were some definitely, like, it was fun, but there were definitely some tense afternoons, and I probably didn't enjoy it as much as I should have.
Okay. Did your students know that you were doing that, where you would be teaching them in the morning and then you'd be like, oh, I got this segment. You could catch me on TV later this afternoon?
Not really. I don't really talk about it much at school.
Yeah.
So like they knew I was working for Major League Baseball, and they knew I was doing like writing and things like that, but I wouldn't talk about it. Yeah, I wouldn't talk about it much at school. And even like I'd have to get dressed up like in the phys ed office, and then go get in my car and drive over to the GO station. And I even felt kind of uncomfortable just leaving the school wearing like a suit jacket and a tie and everything, because I don't know, I just didn't want to draw a lot of attention to myself or whatever. I just kind of wanted to leave quietly. So I try to get out kind of quietly. I probably should have talked about it more. I don't know. It's a weird fine line, but like the kids would probably be interested in it, but then you don't want to feel like you're bragging about anything.
I almost think you could get some street cred where, maybe you could get a little more respect out of the high school kids if they knew that you were hanging with.
Yeah, sometimes high school kids would be like, "Oh, I follow you on Twitter," and I wouldn't know that obviously because I don't keep track. But high school kids would be like, "Oh, I follow you on Twitter." It's like, "Oh, that's great," but like I would never. Yeah, I didn't really talk about it much. Actually, what's interesting is I don't know why, but lately, like the classes I teach right now, they are really into fantasy sports. They're talking a lot of basketball right now because the basketball season's about to start up. And it's interesting because their little minds are like going, and they're trying to figure out how all this stuff works. And I'm just sitting there like casually eating my lunch, like listening to them. And I could totally explain to them how all this works, but I don't. I actually just leave them.
They don't know that the master is in the room.
Yeah, they can just figure this. They'll figure, some of them will figure it out on their own. Yeah. Some of them won't, and it won't really be for them. Like one of them might be like really into it, but yeah, some of them remind me of me. We didn't have the internet at the same quality when I was 15 or 16 like these guys are, but so it's neat to hear them all getting into it. And when I do a lot of my writing, especially when I was with Major League Baseball, I always said I was writing just for like the average fan, like not for the obsessed fan. And when I hear these kids talking, I'm like, oh yeah, that's my audience right there. Yeah. Like when I hear them talking, like that's my audience right there. These guys are not too deep into it yet. They're just having a lot of fun with it. Cool. And they love bickering back and forth about it. So nice. That's the most I've ever heard a class talk about it. And someday maybe I'll talk to them a little bit about it, or show them some videos or podcasts or things like that. But I don't know. I may never bother. I may just let them do their thing. Yeah,
it'll be like a 10-year reunion or something, and be like, Mr. Zinkie, we were talking about this in your class. Why didn't you tell us any of this? We found out who you were after the fact.
That's actually, I do hear. So the teenagers, I don't talk to them much about it. Sometimes kids will graduate, and then I'll get a message from them through social media or something a few years later, and they'll be like, oh, I've really gotten into like sports or fantasy sports or whatever, and like I noticed all the stuff you do, like, hey, do you mind if I bounce a couple questions off you sometimes? And like that's totally great. So once in a while I hear from them, yeah, like a few years later, they just get older and they get a little better with math maybe and things like that, and they get more interested in it.
Yeah, cool. So this conversation, I'd like it to be around football because that's an area that you know a lot about. And then I also would love for people just to know a little bit of your story because you you're a very practical guy. You kind of have an idea of things that you want to be able to accomplish, things that are realistic, and then you can map it out in order to get there. So before we jump into your career, just tell me about a little of your upbringing. So, in your early years, you played multiple sports, mostly for fun. Did you ever have dreams of becoming a professional athlete?
No, not really. I don't think. Yeah, I don't like that. Wasn't something we ever like talked about at home. My parents got divorced when I was 11. It was just me and my brother and my mom, and then my grandma moved in with us. We played sports and like we worked hard at them. I guess like as hard like we thought we were working really hard at them. And we played on some good hockey teams. We were in Coburg that would like win the OMHAs, and then we eventually went and played AAA hockey, and so that. But we were just playing sports and competing and having fun. My parents were never like we never talked about stuff like that. My parents aren't like my mom finished high school and then became a secretary and got married. My dad finished grade 6
Oh,
and that
wow.
was it. Yeah, his dad passed away when he was in grade 6 and he stopped going to school and took over the family farm.
Holy
So
moly.
like they weren't really big on like they were always like yeah you'll go to university,
Yeah.
but we never talked a lot about careers. That wasn't something that was or goals or anything like that. Like we were just having fun playing outside with our friends after school, going to sports, playing video games. Like we never thought about like training or what you should eat or
Yeah.
any of that stuff. And then we just kind of flowed through life. You went through high school, you went to university, you picked something to do for a living. And I didn't think more about goals and stuff, I think, until I was an adult.
Okay. And I must imagine as a single mom that that would be tricky to, be able to haul you guys to different things as well. So it must have been part of just the dynamic of the household that this is just the reality of what we're doing.
Totally. And we lived in the country, probably about the same distance from the rink and from town that you guys live.
Okay.
So you can probably picture that. So, so yeah, like my mom always got us to everything. Or got someone to get us to everything. I got a lot of rides with a lot of friends' parents. I went to a lot of hockey tournaments without anyone else from my family, like where my mom
Yeah.
would just give me $50 for food and I'd be sleeping in with someone else's family in their hotel room. And it
Yeah.
was just quite normal. It's
Yeah.
small town, you knew all the people, right? And my mom would just be like, "Yep, this family's taking you this on this weekend to this tournament in this town. Here's some money, and I'll drop you off in their driveway, and they'll take you." So
Yeah.
you just got used to it. It is what it was, and we never had any resentment towards anything. Like we were just happy we got to go and my brother and I were both happy we got to go and do all those things. And once you're a teenager, you're actually just happy when your parents leave you alone, to be honest, and
Yeah.
let you do what you want. So, with just my mom around and her working all the time, like nobody was harping on what we ate or what we did. We were just having fun. So we
Yeah.
were totally fine with the situation.
So now AAA hockey is pretty competitive. Obviously, it was back then too. And with you not having been in rep sports up until your teenage years, how did that happen? And how were you able to enter into the team? Was there any problems? Because it can be a political thing where all of a sudden this new kid comes in. Did you take a spot away from someone else? Like, what was that whole dynamic like?
So I would say that I was completely oblivious to all dynamics. Like
Okay.
it just wasn't like so. Yeah, so AAA hockey. It's interesting. Like nobody traveled for stuff like that. Like when I was a kid, like we played for Quinty and lived in that district, but like Quincy is such a huge area to have to drive to. Like nobody even considered that. Like our Coburg team we won the OMHAs and like some kids had 100 points and there was even a boy on our team had 150 goals
Wow.
in one season. And then the next year he just played for Coburg again.
Okay.
And like nowadays, like the parents would be like, "Oh, you've got to go play AAA like right away." Like we won the OMHAs for 3 years in a row, and nobody left, and nobody went and played AAA, and because like it just seemed really far to drive to Belleville, and like who was going to do that? And then all of a sudden, once we were in high school, then kind of a bunch of people decided at the same time they were going to do that, and then for that season, like I think my mom hardly ever drove to Belleville. I just got a ride with someone else every time. There were 4 or 5 kids from Coburg on my team, and there's some dads who were pretty keen on it, and you just hopped in the back of someone else's van and got a ride. And so and then without my mom even there much, like she wasn't into the gossip
Yeah.
and like the parent politics. Like she always just paid our fee and worked the canteen a little bit when we were in Coburg to help, and that was it. I really was oblivious, I think, to all that. I was just going to play hockey. The team was better. The hockey was harder.
Yeah.
There were still 4 or 5 friends on the team. I met some new people, but we didn't get my family didn't get wrapped up in all those things. And like we played some rep soccer and stuff too in Coburg. But again, it was just like for fun.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh yeah, you can play on this team, sure. We never got wrapped up in it. We never talked. So for example, we never talked about like sports or hockey at home,
Okay.
like not with our parents. Like my brother and I might talk about it a little bit, but you just went and played, and then you went home and went back to playing video games or playing mini sticks in the basement or whatever. So it was like a very light atmosphere, and I don't think that was maybe the case in everyone's house, but the AAA hockey was definitely less of a thing back then. And there are other players who I remember playing against who were playing single A or double A hockey and then went on to play in the OHL, and their parents never pushed them to AAA hockey either if it was a drive.
It has completely changed now, and now I feel like we can talk a little bit about the financial side of things, because now it almost would seem like if you don't have the money, you may not be able to play. And like specifically, if you've got a single parent who is having to work a couple of jobs, I almost laugh sometimes because I feel like you need to have 2 people working full-time jobs. But then because they're working, how do you drive your kid around? Because those people are at work, and now you have to figure out how to get your kid to practice. So it has become this thing that is a lot more stressful for everybody. What do you think we could say to a kid who may not be financially well off or may not have the family support, but still really wants to play sports?
Yeah, so hockey has definitely become like an elitist financial sport. It is just at the higher levels it has. You can play house league for a few $100 a year. If you want to be a good hockey player, like if a kid wants to be a hockey player, he needs to be on the ice a fair amount. To be on the ice a fair amount costs a lot of money. And it almost doesn't matter if you play AAA or AA or single A, you're still paying for ice. If you're going to be on the ice 4 or 5 times a week, it's going to cost a fair amount of money. And there's a lot more things now, the clothing and all these other things, the fancy jerseys and everything that we didn't have a long time ago. But just the ice time itself, I've done through the high school lots of things where we need to book ice for things, like it just adds up so quickly. Now, what's great for kids, I think, with sports is that there's so many other sports out there that they can play that are cheaper and pretty reasonable. And I've seen lots of kids, play football at our high school, and they're total. This is crazy when you think about it as like the parent of a AAA hockey kid, but a family might spend like $1,000 on football, not in a year, ever. Like over the entire time the kid plays football, and then he goes and plays in university, because he's got physical gifts and he works hard in the free school weight room after school and plays on a football team that costs a couple $100 a year, and that's it. And he needs very minimal equipment. And like I say, they may spend $1,000, maybe $2,000 ever over the whole time, which is not even a year of AAA hockey. So there's so many sports like that. Basketball is starting to get expensive, actually, in all honesty. You can get pretty good at basketball on your own, but it's starting to get expensive. Baseball is expensive now. Maybe they're not quite as expensive as hockey, but getting good at sports is starting to become, there's a few, like I say, there's a few sports left. Football, volleyball, I think you can get away with a decent price because they don't start playing at a high price until at least till they're teenagers. Hockey's probably the worst one for that. You just need to be on the ice, and it's a young development sport. Like your pathway in hockey gets carved for most kids by the time you're 10 or 12. A lot of these other sports we see kids playing university, they don't even start playing them until they're 10 or 12 or even in high school. And then they can still play them beyond high school if they're athletic. So it kind of bothers me the way hockey is, but I understand it's just a product of the fact that it's a really hard sport to practice without being on the ice.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a nice segue into football. So when you did your master's in coaching, you had a placement with football, and that took you to the United States. Can you tell me a little bit about what that was all about?
Yeah, so the coaching program was really cool. I had taught for about 3 years and I heard about it through a friend, kind of looked it up online. I don't know the status of that program at the University of Victoria now. If it hasn't changed, it was this really cool program where they only let in about a dozen people a year from across Canada. And you would do courses out at UVic for 2 summers in a row. And in between those 2 summers during the school year, you go out and do 2 different coaching placements. Could be in the same sport, could be in different sports. Um, and then those coaching placements, they try to hook you up with someone at a higher level, whether you were with a pro team or a university or something like that. To get you a chance to be mentored by higher level coaches. So for my fall placement, I went down to the States. I went to Central Connecticut State University and did a placement there coaching football, which was like a really cool experience. It was quite the crash course in how to coach football because Americans live football like so much more than Canadians do.
Yeah.
I remember sleeping in the office on Saturday night. We had all these VHS tapes. So this is now I really date myself. It was 2002. We had all these VHS tapes, and after the game, like this giant machine would make like a different VHS tape for every position coach from different cameras. It was a really cool setup, but basically someone just needed to be there to keep the machine rolling,
Okay.
and that was the guy I was staying with, who went on to work at like this guy went on to work at like a lot of really big universities. So good for him for putting in the extra work. But like you legitimately on Saturday night just slept on the floor in the office and would get up like every hour and like change the VHS tape so that by Sunday morning all the coaches had like what they needed. And this guy was like 25 and he was grinding, just trying to,
Yeah.
do a good job and get ahead. So it was a really cool thing. It taught me how to coach football pretty well and gave me like a high standard for how it's coached.
Yeah.
And then was able to come back and start doing, football coaching here in a high school and having that experience, just that life experience too, was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool coaching program to meet people from all different sports in the program. There were hockey people, there were track and field people, all these different sports, volleyball people who were trying to be high level coaches and really effective coaches. Just the talk over beers on a Friday night and everything was really fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
I remember trying to learn football when I was in the States and I worked in a dorm. So I had to check in. It was a male dorm. We were broken up into male, female. There was one co-ed dorm and that was for the smart people. So I worked the front desk to make sure I was checking in any guests into the dorm. And it was basically where all the football guys lived. And they would come in and they just chat and they were like, "You're a soccer player. Do you know anything about football? Like, what can we talk about?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Why don't you guys explain it to me? Because I have no idea." And I was doing my athletic training degree. So I was going to be having a placement with a football team. And I know the basics of football, but in order to figure out all those plays and everything, no idea. And so there's this big whiteboard. They pulled in this big whiteboard and it was basically like crash football course. And still to this day, I don't understand a lot of it. So there is a cool mindset that goes into the strategy and everything with football, which I feel like is a little bit different from other sports. So I was trying to get an appreciation for it. And what I wanted to talk with you about today is that there's a super negative side that I also have with football. And it can be with other sports too, where there's this culture aspect that goes into it. So even today, in preparation for this, I was just scrolling through some of the headlines with ESPN or Sportsnet or whatever it was, and just looking at the comments. And so that is the target market, right? So when you see people that are commenting on certain things, I create this belief system based around that culture of that sport. And unfortunately, a lot of it is negative. So you have a different take on football for all of the reasons that you were talking about, where maybe a kid gets a chance that they wouldn't otherwise because of money or whatever the circumstances might be. So tell me a little bit so I can change my mindset about what is so great about football and why kids can take advantage of this thing in order to help them out when they're younger.
Yeah, so I've always liked football. To be honest, I kind of I like football, I like baseball, I like hockey, basketball, like kind of all pretty similarly. I've always liked high school football. I always wanted to coach high school football as just something. I think it's a really fun sport where you get really deep into it in high school and like have a lot of an impact with the kids. Some of the things that I like about football for young people, one of the things is it is attainable for anyone. There is no real financial barrier to it. It's a sport that's really interesting in that you can have all the different body types working together at the same time, and I find that really fun in a school setting. Like there just aren't many sports where you can have someone who's 150 pounds and someone who's 300 pounds, and
Yeah.
they're just equally valuable
Right.
at what they do. And the 300 pounder can't do the 150 pounder's job, and vice versa. And I find that really fun. There is for sure, other than quarterback or something. I've had some. I'll be honest. I've had some soft quarterbacks over the years. Other than that, like there is a prerequisite that you have to be comfortable with some level of physical play, like with a fair amount of level of physical play to play football. Like if you, I've coached many kids who are athletic, but they just can't get comfortable with either someone tackling them or them tackling someone else. They just can't get around that. They hesitate, they're
Mhm.
nervous to do it, and they just can't be good football player. You can't be good football players. That being said, like I've coached guys who are like that quote unquote like animal, like you'd
Yeah.
see like in a movie or Hollywooded up. But then I've coached some really great football players that are actually very calm, very mild mannered, and almost like very technical. There's a boy from our high school who we just graduated who's going to play at Queens next year, and he's a great lineman, and he's about 6'3" and about 300 pounds. He's really skilled, and he's very mild mannered, and he just kind of goes about his business. He knows how to block. He's definitely very, very tough, but he's not that Hollywood type, like frothing at the mouth to hurt
Yeah.
someone kind of player. He's going to do his job and move you out of the way so that we can run the ball, or he's going to do his job on defense and get past you and make a tackle. But he's smart, he's studious. Like I said, he's mild mannered. So I like how there's like all those different personality types. I think it's fun in a high school where you can really get deeply invested into it, where like you can get a large group of boys, and I say boys like the team's open to girls. We've had girls play football before, but it's predominantly boys.
Yeah.
You can get a large group of boys. You get maybe 25 kids in every grade, because the football team will have 40 or 50 kids on it. You
Yeah.
make 25 boys in every grade, and we're a small high school, so that's actually a good percentage of the boys who are interested in sports, and they can like really bond. They go to practice every day together. They can like eat lunch together in the cafeteria and talk about their plays. I've had so many teachers complain to me over the years, like they're not paying attention in class because they've got their playbook and they're like looking at it, and like that's not ideal, but it's cute, right? Like they're really into it. and
Right.
and
Yeah.
a lot of them, and a lot of the guys that you get in high school football, they weren't the hockey stars.
Okay.
The real hockey stars usually don't have time to play high school football. We've had lots of AAA players play who just really, really wanted to, but most of them don't.
Yeah.
We get some AA hockey players, some single A hockey players, some house league guys, some guys who've never played hockey, some good soccer players who
Yeah.
are athletic and agile and really want to try football. I find it's just a fun thing, and you only get kind of a few years to play it. I
Yeah.
think that's a really neat aspect to it too. Like you can start playing hockey or soccer when you're 4, and you can still be playing it when you're 64.
Yeah.
Like your body can play football for like, you got to be young and spry. Like unless you are a real physical freak, like you can start. I actually don't believe in kids playing football when they're 8 or 9. I know in America they all do. I like them playing for 4 or 5 years of high school. If you're really special, play it for a few years in university, and then that's it. I think that's better for your body
Yeah.
overall. And the way we treat the bodies in football has just changed so much. Like we hit so much less in practice than we used to.
Okay.
Used to be even when I started coaching, the practice was a real grind.
Yeah.
Now, like you teach the kids you have to teach them how to tackle and get tackled, like that, how to block and get blocked and everything. But the practices, especially grade 9 and 10, it's a fair grind. But then once we get those skills into them, then I find grade 11 or 12, the practices are much more technical, and we don't often during the week, we don't really hit at all in practice. You're just going to hurt each other. It doesn't help your chances in the game. So, and pro teams don't hit much, and college teams don't hit much anymore.
I've heard a quote saying it's not if you get hurt, but when you get hurt. So you kind of have to factor all of that in too. And you don't want your kids getting hit and hurt in your practices. You need to be able to have them, playing for, well, we hope that they're playing lifelong something or moving.
Yeah,
lifelong,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, for sure. And different people's, and it's interesting, like just having coached now hundreds of there's players who play and just never get hurt.
Oh, wow.
And then there's some who are just hurt all the time, and they do the same things. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like we don't joke about kids getting hurt, but you'll almost joke about, you'll be like that one guy, like just every time, like every week it's a sprain this or a twisted that or whatever. And then there's other guys who are doing even more contact and things, and they're just never hurt. And they're not necessarily tougher. just maybe their body's a little more flexible. Maybe their body's just a little more durable. We see pro athletes who basically never miss games, and we see pro athletes who just can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
Like everybody's body, is just different. So yeah, I've always just enjoyed, I think the high school football is just really, it's a really fun experience that a kid can have for a few years. And if it's managed well and in a really positive way, I think you can get away from all that BS that comes into some football programs. And in all honesty, like it's in a lot of American football programs.
Yeah.
It's hyper competitive. They start in tyke football at ages 6, 7, 8. And it becomes sometimes maybe a little too much of a blood sport. I think they're getting away from that in a lot of places, but like not everywhere for sure.
Well, we can talk about an example that just happened with the coach in Georgia who's coaching a U9 group of football boys. And he went a little bit crazy with a couple of them where he punched them and he was banned for life to coach now. And it was caught on camera. So obviously, it had to be made an example. There had to have been something that was done. But my reaction to looking at the boys that were hit was sad and enraging for me because they didn't really seem to react. And I was like, okay, that looks like a kid that has had that done to them before. And the group around them, the boys around them, didn't really do anything and it didn't really seem to phase them. And then if you look at the coaching staff that was around them, they didn't really do anything. They didn't tell the coach
Mhm.
to stop or anything. And so, one of the things that I had read looking at this article on social media was somebody who said, like, you wouldn't do that to a kid if they were performing poorly in algebra. There's no way that a kid would get clocked upside the head because they didn't understand their math properly. And so there's a double standard almost that happens where we let certain things go because we consider it to be part of the game. And then there's this other side where it's like, well, in normal life, we wouldn't do that. You wouldn't just, be violent towards a child. So there is a side that is really scary. And so I would like your opinion in the coaching perspective because you have the ability to make an impact on the people that you're working with. And if these boys know that coach is a certain way, that can go good or bad. So coach can be violent and he can swear and he can be belittling towards women. And then all of a sudden this group of boys thinks that that's normal because they look up to you. Now there's this other side where they can look up to you and say, no, coach doesn't like us when we swear. They don't accept it when we say things about women. They definitely would not approve of us fighting each other, outside of any situation. And so, how do you coach so that you're making an impact, not only just in football, but also in life?
Yeah, the hard part is, like you were saying with the algebra, the big difference between the algebra and the sports is the algebra doesn't come on like all at once with all those emotions involved,
Yeah,
like we
yeah,
we get to the rink or the field and everybody gets fired up and all of a sudden everything starts flying around and people get
yeah,
really mad. Like nobody like you have so much time, like you treat algebra with some calmness because it happens slowly, and like you get all fired up. That the thing that happened with that coach in Georgia, yeah, it's really disturbing. It's especially the follow-up quotes. Like one of his follow-up quotes was, "I shouldn't have done that at the field."
right.
Right?
And
Which
it's
means
almost
like,
like,
oh, I should have done it at home
right,
or something. And I'm not judging the mother of the boy that he smacked, but she declined to press charges, which again is totally her choice.
yeah,
It makes you kind of wonder though if she was okay with it
right,
and was like, okay, well that's, oh, they got it on film and it's too bad that he got fired, but like I was okay with that punishment for him. And I think I felt bad for all the little kids around because they're probably all terrified. Like
yeah,
you can't see their faces through their face mask from
yeah,
the angle of the camera, but they're probably all just standing there thinking like, holy smokes, like I'm just going to stand still right now. And they're probably frozen.
yeah,
Like I don't want to get hit next.
yeah,
So I think that coaches, one of the problems sometimes with coaching and if they're not well vetted is it attracts that dominant bully kind of personality. I'm going to get these kids, I'm going to make them great at sports and we're going to get glory because I need it or something like that. I find the longer I coach, as I don't know, maybe this is just me like having kids now and just being older and stuff, but I find I've mellowed a lot since I
yeah,
started coaching. sometimes I even think I'm too mellow actually when I coach football now. Like I've just kind of like everything's kind of already happened. Like we've won, we've lost, we've blown it, we've come back. Like it's just like, oh, we'll see what happens today. And sometimes I think I'm a little too mellow when I coach now and could probably stand to get back a little bit of the fire that I had in my 20s. Not that I had the fire of that guy down in Georgia, but
Right.
I think, yeah, I think it's important to recognize that like as a coach, like the most important thing is you're trying to train these kids like for life. They're trying to have some fun and then but also like grow up and mature and be good people when they're older. And if you can't model that, then like youth sports coaching isn't the right thing for you, no matter how many games you win. Like
Yeah.
if you can't, like if you can get to the NFL and you can coach in the NFL, maybe you can be as big of a jerk as you want because the whole point is just to win and get
Yeah.
paid and everything. Like really they're adults and maybe like it would be preferable if you mentored them, but if you don't, maybe that's fine. But when you're coaching kids at any age, like you have to be able to model. There's just a lot of there's a lot of things the older I've gotten, like as an example, with my football teams now, like we never talk about like hating the other team.
Okay.
It drives me nuts when coaches talk about that. I'm like, why would we hate the kids on the other team? They're like actually the exact same as you guys. They just live 15 minutes west of us. Like we'll be going to play like a good team at Oshawa or something. And I'll be like,
Yeah.
okay, like first of all, we don't hate them.
Yeah.
Like they're actually just you guys. They just live in a suburb in Oshawa and you live in a suburb in Curtis. There's no difference between you guys other than that.
Yeah.
Are there some teams that behave more obnoxiously when they play than others? Absolutely. And that's totally a reflection of the adults that lead them.
Right.
It's not the kids, it's the adults that lead them and what they let slide and what they decide is appropriate. But I mean, like you want to win when you play sports because you want to win. You
Yeah.
don't need to hate the other guy. You don't need to despise the other guy to want to win. Like it's not the 1970s and we're not playing Russia in hockey or something anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's just, like we see pro athletes all the time. They play, they compete as hard as they possibly can. And then after the game, they're all like hugs and high fives and getting their picture taken together and all this stuff. Like they didn't try less hard
Yeah.
because they don't despise the guy on the other side of the field. Like I think that stuff's just outdated. And I think it's the job of the adults to get rid of all those things because kids will follow your lead on all this stuff. They will follow the lead that they're given.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Because I've coached with a lot of people and they've kind of said something like, oh, we're going to do this because this is what my coach did when I was playing. And
Mm-hmm.
so you remember those things. And if you've experienced it, then that's kind of what your recall is going to go back to. And so putting in that extra time and figuring out what you can do differently and hopefully better would be amazing. And I really liked your point about the vetting process because we look into people's background checks, like police background checks, and you're okay if you are without a criminal record, but we don't actually look into anger issues or like a lot of these mental health things, and they may not even know that they have them because most people are probably not seeing therapists or anything. And I think you're really right about that control that a person might be lacking in their life and then seeking to be able to find that some way, and then all of a sudden they're in this position of power and maybe they're lacking something in their life and they're able to fulfill it in a different kind of way, which is scary for me to think about because kids are going to do exactly what you tell them to do. There's been so many scenarios where I've been running a session and I'm like, okay, this is what we're going to do today, and nobody really questions it, they just do
Mm-hmm.
it. Yeah, so having these coaches that have complete power, we really have to be observant of, is that being channeled in a good way, or is this potentially going to be setting them up for problems later on or even at this moment?
Yeah, I think I do have to give like youth sports credit. I think like it's there's always going to be like a ways to go, and there's always going to be holes in the system. I will say that I think they do like a way better job like vetting coaches around here. I think they do than they used to. Like in the youth sports, like I know, say like the hockey coaches, like they have to put in an application and they have to do an interview, and that interview, like I don't know every hockey association is the same. I know that happens in Clarington, but I think they're all pretty much the same. And that interviews with a few people on a committee. It's not just like your friend Dave from work or whatever. And like I know there's still times where there's nepotism, or again, like we're gonna pick Tom because like I work with him and like he wants the job. Like I know that stuff still happens, but I think
Yeah.
overall they're doing a lot better job of Hockey Canada's getting, for example, getting questions out, like these are good questions to ask a coach and see what his answers are, and
Yeah.
about development and things. I think school sports should be decently coached because they should start with teachers coaching the teams. And if
That's right.
the teachers can't be proper role models, then you have big problem. And there are some that I've coached against who aren't great role models, I think, but mostly
Yeah.
they're not bad. So I think we've made big improvements with all those things. Are all those improvements happening in every sport everywhere? No. Sometimes our coaches, I think sometimes at the lower levels of sport, it's actually more concerning because that's where they're desperate to get a coach and
Right.
they'll actually just take anyone.
Yeah.
And that's where I think sometimes you're maybe more likely to get someone who's in it for all the wrong reasons. At least the person at the higher level, if that job's a little more coveted, like maybe they lie their way through to being the coach, but at least there's a bunch of hoops to jump through, to show what they're all about. So
Yeah.
I think we're continuing to just make strides in the right direction. The hard part with sports is that it's, like I said earlier, it's emotional. So people can say all the right things in an interview, and they can not have a criminal record because they don't go around
Right.
society like assaulting people or anything, but
Yeah.
sometimes they can screw up in the moment, and and then they have to be held accountable for that, obviously. But everyone in life makes some mistakes, and sports is one of those things that, the old slogan, sports doesn't build character, it reveals it. And like sometimes things can go wrong in sports, and whether it's players or coaches or whatever can act really poorly, and then that coach might go home and be like, man, what was I doing? I don't act like that the rest of the time. Like,
Yeah.
what got into me?
Yeah. And could you
And
imagine if someone checked you on that, where they questioned you on it and you had to sit back and actually think about what you did, and you were like, whoa, yeah, that was not okay. But I don't think people
yeah.
do that often enough. I feel like we almost just let it go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people often sometimes people want to give people the benefit of the doubt. So
Yeah.
they let poor behavior go and say like, oh, well, maybe that's just a one-off or whatever. I think also sometimes people just don't want to be the next one to get in the way. If someone does something poor that's poor and shouldn't be done to someone, and then you're a bystander, a lot of people I think sometimes are like, well, I don't want to get mixed up in that. So I'm just
Right.
gonna stay out of that. I don't want my kid to get caught up in all that, so I'm just gonna stay out of it. And
Yeah.
so like it puts people in an awkward spot. I think it's the same as everything else in life. I think like most of the time, whether it's 99% of the time, 95% of the time, whatever, things are being done well and right.
Mhm.
And the few times that it isn't, that ends up in the media. And with social media now, you can actually see someone in Georgia hit a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have saw that 25 years ago,
Yeah.
like it, but it's the same in everything else. There's, most policemen are great. The odd one does something really bad and we all read about it in the paper. Most teachers are great. Every few months I read about some teacher who's been let go because they did something, really bad. I think sports coaches are the same way, but at least we have to treat them as important because, as you said, they do have a lot of impact on those young kids.
Yeah. I want to talk about the fans as well. So Des Bryant just recently tested positive for COVID. And again, I'm curious about the reaction. So I go into the comments, and it's always bad. Someone always says, just here for the comments. So that was me.
Mhm.
And a lot of the people were saying he's a whiner, he's a complainer, he's just looking for his ticket out of here. And so I wanted to find out more about him and find out why so many people were emotionally invested in this. So here's a guy, everybody is worried about getting COVID, but people they didn't really have empathy for the diagnosis or for the health condition. They were just really fired up about him being the way that he is. And so I looked into him a little bit, and he has, a track record of damaging a house and being sued for damages when he had a rental. And then he had somebody sued him because he had a huge jewelry bill that he couldn't pay. And so there's a few things that he's done in his career. I don't know how he is as a player and whatever, but I went way back to his upbringing, and he was born to a 15-year-old young woman, and she was arrested for dealing crack cocaine when he was 8 years old. And then from there, he was put into 8 different homes and was, transferred around and all the rest of it. So, what I'm trying to do is figure out how we can humanize these athletes and figure out when we say these things, or we have these emotional reactions, or we have these opinions about everything, can we get to a point where we realize that they are actually human beings? Do you have any examples of kids that you've completely transformed and that are on a great path now because of their football experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had kids who, when I met them in grade 9, I thought there's no way they would go to university, let alone play football at it. And then they end up doing both. And, and you end up really proud of them. And then we've had other kids who have all the talent in the world and you're sure they're going to go far. And then like I get lots of them, and then they get into drugs and they don't turn out the way that you were hoping they would. And you try, but in the end, you're just one voice, and their parents are still the biggest influence on them. And I've worked with lots of great parents over the years. I've also worked with lots of enabling parents over the years who don't really hold their kids as accountable probably as they should have. And parents who struggle, like you said about Des Bryant, like he was born to someone who was probably not equipped to raise a child, let alone raise a star athlete child. And then that's probably had a negative impact on him all the way through. I think you hit on something that, bigger than even just coaching, but like people on social media are just jerks. Like people on social media, like just type something, like it's like they're trying to be jerks. I'm not one of them. I don't do that, but I know from all the time, like that, I know athletes get treated inhumanely all the time, and I dealt with that when I still deal with that working in baseball. Where athletes will get these comments sent to them on social media being like, hey, you went 0 for 4 and like cost my fantasy team the game, nice, and like bleep 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 bleep, right? And this guy just like went 0 for 4 and he's just trying to like he's just trying to go maybe pick up some groceries and go home and have dinner with his family or whatever, and get back at it the next day. And he's got these random people who aren't aspiring to anything, like our phones are dangerous, and people get on there and they and Des Bryant someone should have taken his phone before they told me he had COVID. That's his problem beyond the few legal issues he's had. He's always been known as not a great teammate because he's so reactionary about things. And like, if I got diagnosed with COVID, and probably I'm going to guess if you got diagnosed with COVID, you wouldn't broadcast it on your social media platform, even though we have far fewer followers than him. We would not post it for the world to see in the first 5 minutes. Like I would take a more measured approach and be like, okay, what do I have to do now? Right. And like who have I been around? Who do I need to call right now? Do I need to go home right now? How do I get home right now? And that's what most people are doing. Most athletes, most politicians. And then you'll get a tweet or something from them the next day or later that day being like, I've been diagnosed with this. This is how I'm feeling. I'll be back as soon as I can. And if people respond negatively to that, then it's terrible. But I think but at least they tried. Whereas his problem, Des Bryant's problem, is it's just reactionary. I got COVID and now I quit and whatever, and nobody knows. Like, so obviously people are gonna have negative reactions to it because he didn't put it out to the world like in probably the best way that he could have. So, and that's been his problem a lot. But like you said, you looked into him deeply and found a very flawed person who happens to be talented athletically. But most people aren't going to put that time into learning all about it. They're just going to be like, oh, this guy's an idiot. And then they, for some reason, need to write something really mean back to him. Why would you write something really mean to a guy who just got told he had COVID? I don't get that. Me either. It's happening, and it's happening more and more all the time. And I know I've talked to athletes before who are sick of it, and they want to be on social media and engage, but like they can't read their comments at all. If they do, like it'll ruin their day.
And so I think you just gave young people advice in talking about that. So any kid that's listening right now, before you grab your phone, when you're emotional, take a deep breath and try and figure out if this is the best thing that you could be doing right now, or if you could take a minute and regroup and then go back to it maybe in a little bit a little bit later.
Like if you're not 100% sure that that's an appropriate thing to say, don't say it. Like if you're not if there's even a part of you that's like, I wonder if that's mean. It's definitely mean. Don't say it. Like, don't say it. And if you want to say something like funny or mean about him, Des Bryant or some athlete, just text it to like 2 of your friends. He doesn't see it. No one else sees it. Your friends might chuckle. If that's like, you guys want to make a joke, that's fine. But like, you don't have to put it like, right. And I do find teenagers now when they talk, and I even have watched my own kids with this, like teenagers when they talk, like this person's trash and this guy's the worst and all these things. And I'm like, these guys are like all professional athletes. Like they would destroy you at everything, and you're like, oh, this guy on the Raptors is trash and all this. They'll say these, like I'll hear students talking and I'm like, that guy's like 6'6" and a professional basketball player. Like I get that he is not great in the NBA, but like the way they talk about them like so harsh.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know. And I think that's that social media 2020. That's where we are. Like you have to have a strong take or people find you boring. I was
right.
just talking to my brother about that recently. Like if you just like, oh, that guy's pretty good.
Yeah,
Like nobody clicks on that. It's got
right.
to be like really,
Fired
this
up.
guy's amazing or horrible. That's what the sports shows are like now. Like you've got to be polarizing or else nobody's interested. And it's too bad because like often the middle ground is the right ground and
Yeah,
that doesn't sell
yeah.
anymore. So, and we see it in the news and we see it in sports and it's disappointing because yeah, I don't think people are always treated with as much respect as they should be.
Yeah. So let's go into one more example on that and then I'll move on. So Sarah Fuller is playing with the Vanderbilt game. And this is a big deal because she is one of the first females that's been included. Although I did read that there was a woman years ago. So maybe she's not the first,
Hmm.
but technically she just got some points this past weekend of the time of this recording. So I again went through the comments and it was really interesting because I follow ESPN and then I'll follow ESPNW, so women.
Okay. Yep.
And on the ESPN Facebook page, it was some were supportive, but then others were there leaked nudes in the dressing room? Did she bring cookies for the team? I hope somebody smashes her. You know, like all of these things where it was just not okay with having a woman in there. And then if you went into the ESPNW site, obviously it was a lot more supportive, where it's like, congratulations, that's so awesome, and blah, 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 whatever. And so again, like what you're talking about is she's a person. And so this is going to be even harder on her because she's completely isolated in this world. And there's a lot of attack on her. And so there's this sexist side of being okay with saying certain things. And just like what you said, where you're like, I don't understand how people would just say this. Same thing here. I was looking at these men's profiles. Like I didn't actually go to their page or anything, but it was clearly a man with a family, right? In one of these pictures. And then he was saying something where he was degrading this young girl playing football. And I was just thinking, why would you do that? Like, I'm sure that there's maybe a daughter in that picture, or maybe it's a cousin, you know, whoever it is. But here you are putting yourself out there, fully okay being sexist, and then potentially having your employer see that too. So there's that side of it where I was just like, okay, what gives a certain kind of person the okay to say certain things because they think that they'll be supported in that space?
Yeah, I think some people, when they say the things, I don't even think they care. It's almost like they don't even care if they're going to be supported. Or it's like I wonder if some of the people are posting these things almost for their own entertainment. Like
Okay,
they post it knowing that some people are going to agree with them and be like, heck yes, that's right. And then
right.
some people are going to call them human garbage, but they actually enjoy all that because like it's a lot better than just sitting in their living room and having nobody care about them at all.
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes if it's like they're creating their own theater. Just watching the game isn't good enough
Okay.
now, so it has to be better than that. So now it's like I'm going to watch the game and I'm going to make like this. It wouldn't surprise me if a lot of the same people who make the offensive comments about her, if you could go through all the comments they've made about everything, are also making the offensive comments to Des Bryant or a
Right.
quarterback who stunk today or whatever. They're creating their own drama. They're creating their own life on the internet, which
Okay.
is again why Sarah Fuller, if she's smart, won't read anything that's written about her. Like
Yeah.
unless it comes from a major, like a regular news source, sure. But
Yeah.
anything else, and she's been a really polarizing one. You're right. There was a girl, I believe her name was Katie Nida.
Okay.
I might have that, but anyway, she kicked for New Mexico, and she was a different story than Sarah Fuller because she was like actually their kicker, whereas
Okay.
Sarah Fuller, like Vanderbilt, their kickers had COVID.
Right.
They needed a kicker all of a sudden. They got her. She did a kickoff, and then this week she did an extra point. But now they have their kicker back, and
Yeah.
he's actually kicking the field goals. So now she's kicking the extra points. And then I have seen some people raise like more of a legitimate concern of being like, so like why, like, so on a football team the guy who kicks the field goals always kicks the extra points, so why isn't the guy who's kicking the field goals also picking the extra points? Is
Right.
this like a publicity stunt? Like is this something they're doing for attention? Vanderbilt's not a very good team usually, like that kind of thing. At the same time, it's like really great for her and like really great for young girls to see stuff like that, and I
Right.
don't think it cheapens what the girl from New Mexico did, where she was the actual kicker on the team. I think what the girl from New Mexico did is like a bigger accomplishment, where she like beat out all the other possible people and was deemed as her coach as like the best kicker on the team, and then
Right.
did all the kicking duties. So it's weird. It's like people can't even talk about some of these things anymore. Like if you bring up both sides of it,
Yeah.
people are just like, then people are just like, wait, you said that, like you must hate women, or then, and then you've got all these like random people pushing in from the side, just saying like oh, she must have baked the coach cookies or something like that, which is just like dumb.
Yeah.
Like, again, I think those people are just creating their own drama, and it's too bad that social media, like these guys 30 years ago would have been sitting in a bar saying dumb things, having people think they're idiots. Now they're on their phones doing it, and unfortunately we all get roped into reading it.
Yeah.
And I try to never read the comments below anything. When I got hired by Major League Baseball, one of the first things they told me is never read the comments.
Okay.
Never read the comments below anything that you write.
Okay.
And I didn't listen to them. And then after like 2 times, I was like, yeah, I'm never reading these comments anymore. Like you write something and you're sure it's intelligent, and then you just get the stupidest comments below them. And you're like, why would someone even take the time to write that?
Right.
Like at first I was like, oh, maybe I'll get some like good feedback of people challenging my view, because there's 2 sides to everything.
Yeah.
Right. And being like, hey, you're wrong about this player. He blah, 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 blah. It wasn't. It's just the dumbest things that people can write. I don't know. It's a bad scene out there in social media. Like I try to never read the comments because they just make you angry and depressed. And
okay, so there's another tip to all you young people that are out there: never read the comments.
Don't read the comments. Like when Des Bryant tweets that out, like I do not click on it and like read everything below it or something. Like, and the politics is probably even worse. Like if you click on a real news article, and then everything below it, and but it's tough. And I mean, this is us looking at this as adults. Like try reading this stuff as a 12-year-old.
Exactly.
And all the comments below it. Like that's a really like to get off like the joking about it. Like what are you doing to a 12-year-old's head when he reads something on social media and then reads all these offensive comments about, say, Sarah Fuller or something like that?
Exactly.
Like I'm going to look at it and it's not going to change how I treat people around me at my age.
Yeah. When
you're 12, like it is sending, unfortunately, it's probably sending a message to some of these young people that that's an acceptable way to talk or to treat people. And it's really too bad. Like we didn't have that when we were growing up. Like you were just influenced by the media, not just anyone sitting there playing on their phone. Like they couldn't get into your head like they can for young people now. And I think it's scary for them out there. I don't know when I'm going to let my kids on social media, my own kids, but it's not soon.
Yeah. I read a really good thing, and it was back in the day, there were 2 belief systems. There was TV, and then there was your immediate surroundings. And so now we've added in a third, exactly what you're saying. So there's extra belief system is out there. And so if I read the headline saying Sarah Fuller just made history, and it was a positive headline, but then I was questioning my belief system by reading the comments, then I might form a different opinion, because there could have been tons of people that were not supportive of that. And just like what you're saying, that's super influential on a young person. And so, we have to be really careful about what they're looking at and I think the main thing, and that's why I'm doing this, is just to have conversation. So making sure that whatever they're reading or whatever they're finding out about, that we're tapping in every once in a while and just saying, so what do you think about that? And then let's just at least talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's safer for young people to just watch Sports Center or watch like the 6 o'clock news and then talk about it with your family, whatever. But watch Sports Center and like, oh, this girl did this kick, like let's talk about it. Right? Are you interested in that? Like, do you want to talk about it or whatever? Right? Or what do you think of that? And or watch the news and like just have the news presented in a fairly brief, like I say, like the 6 o'clock CBC, CTV, whatever, just brief snippets. This is the story, and then you guys can process it. Because if you leave young people to watch and figure all this stuff out through social media, like there's some really warped views out there, and there's a lot of people out there who are making a lot of money not being honest and not being who they really are. They're just clickbait all the time, and they're trying to get those young people to click on all their stuff, and they don't care if they mess up their minds along the way, because they're just there to make money. So I think as parents, I think we need to control it. Like I said, I'm nervous to put my kids on social media. I'm going to hold off on that as long as I can, and they already have lots of friends who are on it, and like I'm going to hold off as long as I can on it and try to, you know, you don't want to be a controlling parent, but at the same time, you need to have some control.
And there has to be some boundaries. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even like I worry about what my kid would do on it. It's like what we just talked about, like them being influenced
Yeah.
by comments, videos, whatever,
Yeah.
and you know, and getting like a skewed view of reality. So
Yeah. This
because
might
in
be, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say in the end, like let's be honest, like our kids are like 10 and down. They're
Yeah.
not that smart yet. You know, they think they are, but they're not. They're not very smart. They're not very worldly yet. They can't process this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like teenagers are not near as smart as they think at being able to process all these things, even if they can solve a quadratic equation. Like they don't have that life experience and perspective and everything. Like they're very vulnerable. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
it's a tough one.
there's some science behind their brain development, and I don't know the exact date. I'll fact check it and include it
Mhm.
in the post conversation of this one. But yeah, just it was surprising to me that the brain is still going through their cognitive development up into your 20s. So we've got all of
Mhm.
this learning that's happening, and it's still a process for them. But this one might be an interesting for the listeners. So you were talking about how athletes can be affected by people's comments, and I remember you telling us one time that you had a player who found out that you didn't pick him for your fantasy team or something. Do you remember this story?
Oh
And
yeah.
then he called you out on it at the diamond. Is this what happened?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was Kevin Pillar, and he was just joking around.
Okay.
So which is fine. You know, anyways, he's got himself in hot water a few times with things he said in the last couple of years. If you want to search those up once we're done talking tonight, but
Okay.
this was totally fine. But anyways, yeah. So what was interesting about it was so I would do those TV hits right from the top of the Blue Jays dugout in the
Okay.
middle of the afternoon. In the middle of the afternoon, usually while I'd be doing them, the other team would be taking batting practice, and the Blue Jays would just kind of be like hanging around. They'd just be in the clubhouse, or some of them would come out on the field and just like jog or stretch. Some of them would bring out a soccer ball and just kind of play keep up just to get loose,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But the show I was on is on in the clubhouse.
Okay.
So so one thing I always did is so what I did on that show is I would pick people who were going to play really well or poorly that day. And
Okay.
that was my like picks for the day, and we talk about why certain players are going to do well and certain players are going to do poorly. So first of all, when the Blue Jays were at home, I never picked any of the Blue Jays to do poorly because they were like right there. You know what I mean? Like they could literally just walk out and be like, "What you said? You said I'm not gonna get any hits tonight. Like thanks a lot, bud." So I never picked them to play poorly. If I ever picked them to play poorly, I would pick them to play poorly when they were on the road,
Okay.
so that at least they weren't right there, and they'd probably forget about it by the time they were back to Rogers Center.
Yeah.
But like, and sometimes I would pick the Blue Jays to play well, and that was like at the end of near the end of the Batista, Donaldson, and Encarnacion. So they had some good hitters then. So
Yeah.
I'd sometimes pick them to play well, but I didn't pick Kevin Pillar ever. He's just an okay hitter, and on that team, he's probably about the seventh best hitter or so. He just never really got picked, and one time I was just waiting around to start, right? Because I get there like 15, 20 minutes early. I was just waiting around to start. And then he walked by, and as he walked by, he's like, "Hey, when are you going to pick me? You never pick me to do well." And I was so taken off guard by it, right?
Yeah.
And I was off in my own little world. Like one of the things about the TV thing is that nobody knew when I was filming it was like I had to have all these picks and I had to memorize them
Okay.
because you couldn't see anything. It was just me standing with the microphone in front of a camera, and they'd be like, "Hey, Fred, who?" So they would have it up on the screen for viewers at home, but I couldn't see their screen. So
Okay.
they'd be like, "Hey, who's going to name a pitcher who's going to really struggle tonight?" And I had to have that pitcher in my head. I couldn't be like, "Oh, guys, I forget who was it."
Yeah.
So that's not good TV. So while I'd be waiting, I'd just be going over them in my head. I'd be like, this guy, then this guy, then this guy, and this guy. So I'm like totally locked in. So when Kevin walked by and he's like, how come you never pick me? And then like I was in my own little world, and I was like, what? He's like, you never pick me. Like you pick Josh, and you pick like, how come you never pick me? And like I was just like, so we were more in his element than my element at this point. And I was like, I don't really. And then I was like, maybe soon I'll. And then he was like, oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you. Don't worry about it. Like, you're doing a great job. Like, and then he just went into the clubhouse and like, I just chuckled and he chuckled. It was fine. But if he had pressed me on it, I don't know what I would have said, because like, what am I going to do? Look at him and be like, you're actually not that great. You don't draw a lot of walks, and like, you strike out too much. And what am I going to do? Like, say like all these things. Well, actually, Kevin, I've been looking at your stats and you're actually kind of overrated. So I couldn't say any of those things. Like, how do you say that? So,
Right.
but luckily he was just joking around, and he quickly kind of pivoted and was like, all right, I'll see you later. So, and
Yeah.
it's funny because they would walk past me like while I would be doing my stuff, but you don't really know if any of them are really noticing. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
what you're doing or anything. And I'm sure some of the guys never notice or care or anything else, but they're people. If they see their picture up on the TV in the clubhouse, they probably do notice, right? Like,
Yeah.
as good as they are as athletes, like, I'm sure when you see your picture or video up on the TV, you're like, hey, what are they saying about me?
Yeah.
So yeah, they're all human. They would have some neat conversations. I remember listening to Hazel May talk to, I can't remember who it was on the Blue Jays, about where he could buy the best mattress in Toronto.
Okay.
He's like, oh, like, I can't sleep. And it's funny, like, he just, like, again, like, to humanize them, like,
Yeah.
he's just like, yeah, like, I rented this place and the mattress is terrible and like I can't sleep. And she was like, oh, well, I always go to this place, and like my husband and I got a mattress there, and like it's a really great one. He's like, like, they talk about all these things, and like it did give me another impression that, like, again, that these guys are all human, and that a lot of them are pretty young. It
Yeah.
also gave me that impression, like Des Bryant's not young. He's like 32 or 33 now. But some of these guys that are taking these shots on social media all the time are like literally like 20,
Yeah.
22. Like, man, I couldn't handle all that stuff when I was 20 or 22.
No
So
way. No,
yeah.
I think about that time, and I think you're just trying to figure out. I mean, I don't even think you know a lot about yourself, let alone what other people are telling you what they
Mhm.
think about you.
Absolutely. And you're just trying to stay on the team or have some success so you can get paid, because it's your lifelong goal, and you got coaches telling you what to do and everything, which is why they should stay off all that fan stuff, because they've got to lock it into like to what they're doing. But yeah, I did realize when I was there, some of them I'd look at, like, just, at the time, I guess I would have been about 40, and yeah, like, see some of them walk around, and I'm like, man, like, that guy doesn't, a few of them especially, I'd be like, he doesn't look that much older,
Yeah.
than kids that I teach, like, and it might not be 20, 22 years old, some of them.
Yeah.
Um, so you did get an impression for that. And again, like, just hearing, like, listening to them talk, and when they're hanging around, sitting around the dugout and stuff, you realize, like, yeah, these are just like regular people who happen to just be really good at playing a sport. They're not all brilliant. They are, like, do not all have everything together in their life. They're just awesome at throwing baseballs or hitting
Yeah.
baseballs, right?
Yeah.
And other than that, they're just regular 20 and 30-year-old people.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you. We'll finish up with this goal
Mhm.
setting. So you knew that you wanted to be a phys ed teacher, and you knew that that was pretty hard to get in. It's really competitive. And so that's why you went and did your master's in coaching, to kind of get the edge on everybody else and just bump up your resume. And then in order for you to work in fantasy baseball, you started writing for free and volunteering, and then you kind of always had the idea of where you want it to go, and then you figured out the ways to get there. So can you pass upon your wisdom to young people in terms of setting goals and then the work that it takes in order to get there?
Yeah, I think with goal setting, like, you have to have all the intermediate goals, right? Like, you can't just be like for a young person, can't just be like, I want to play for the Blue Jays someday, right? Like,
Right.
it's the intermediate goals. Like, next season I want to hit 20 home runs or something like that. Like, those are, like, that's, I know, kind of how I've always operated. Like when I wanted to be a phys ed teacher and knew that if I just sat around and waited, it probably wouldn't happen for a really long time. So I find that in life, I usually do things in a pretty calculated, like I don't live like a wild life or anything like that, but then there are moments in life where I'll like take a big chance on something. Like, I
Okay.
was teaching elementary, I decided it wasn't for me, and I literally took all my files and put them in the dumpster,
Oh, wow.
and enrolled in that course. Like, I enrolled in that course, got in, and then at the end of the school year threw all my files out so that I couldn't come back. I was like, if
Okay.
I keep the files, then at the end of the year, if I don't have a job that I want, I'll just go back and do my old job, because it'll be so easy to go
Okay.
back. You still have all the files. So I threw everything out. And then sometimes down the road, people will be like, hey, you used to teach grade 4. Do you have some stuff for me? And I'd be like, actually, I don't. And I'm not being a jerk about it, not willing to give you some stuff or find it. Like, I actually
Right.
threw it all out.
Right.
But even, and with the fantasy writing, like, like you have to put it like I never had goals to like be on TV or have my own podcast or anything like that. I just wanted to get into it, and then I'd have intermediate goals. I'd like to like get into this contest that's exclusive and see how I do, or I'd like to get a job with this company in some way, shape, or form. Or once I was when I started working for Major League Baseball, I had like a terrible job. Like I was working maybe 12 hours a week, and most of those hours were like after 11 p.m. Like I didn't have like, oh, actually I did. We had Jackson just barely, like he was a baby at the time. So anyways, it was a crummy, but I had goals like with that, like where it was going to try to move up a little bit along the way. And then sometimes you get a little bit further than you think. But I think the intermediate goals are where some people get, like, I think where young people get lost. Like they have these dreams of like, wanting a certain career or something, but you got to set up like just the intermediate goals. Like the intermediate goal might be like, I want to get an A in my algebra class this semester, right?
Right.
Like that's attainable, and you can do it in like a short amount of time. So, I think setting those intermediate goals is really good. And I think sometimes just recognizing like if other people can do, like you can do stuff. Like at first the world seems really big,
Yep.
and you're like, well, I can't do that. Like I can't be the person who do that. And when I started getting into writing about sports, Sarah and I were just on a vacation, like a sun vacation, and I was reading, and I was like, you know what? I think I want to do this, like just for fun. Like we didn't have kids at the time. Like I think I just want to get involved in this and just see where it goes. And then you just start setting, like I say, like intermediate small goals. This year I'm going to do this. This month I'm going to do this. And then before you know it, if you keep achieving them,
Yeah.
then you can get really far. But I've seen so many kids I've coached in football. I want to play in university. I want to play in university. Okay, sure. Like, what are you going to do like this week or
Yeah.
like this month? Right? Like, how about like you're going to improve your bench press max by 10 pounds, this month? Like that's a goal that you can do now. Like don't talk to like it'll all happen, but if you can reach all the intermediate goals. I think sometimes young people, they set the big goal and they forget about all the intermediate goals along the way.
Yeah. And finally, I'll leave you with some advice for coaches, because that's what we're trying to do, is help coaches out, and you've got a lot of experience. The main thing that we talked about today was football culture and impressioning upon the young people. So what would you say to football coaches working with impressionable kids in order to help them in life?
Well, I would say first of all, especially because we're in Canada, how many football games you win doesn't really matter.
Okay.
So it doesn't really matter. We don't get hired to coach these sports, right? Like pretty much anyone listening to this in Canada, some American coaches do. I've had a lot of American coaches say to me, like, man, I wish I worked in Canada. For all we idolize American sports, they'd be like, I wish I lived in Canada where I didn't have to worry about how many games I won this season. So,
Yeah.
you can win all your games or none of them. You're still going to go home to the same spouse and the same kids and, all these things, and have the same problems in your life and the same good parts of your life. So don't get too wrapped up in all those things. I think coaches should think the same thing as a lot of their players. You have to focus on the process. How does each practice go? How do you treat each other? What kind of work ethic do you bring? It's the same as all those small goals. Instead of being like, I'm going to have the best hockey team in the league or the best football team in the league, just like, what are you going to do in practice today?
Mhm.
That's going to make you and everyone around you a better person and a better athlete, and more skill and all these things. Like it's setting those. I think even coaches get into this. Like, we're going to have this awesome team. Okay, well, like, what are you doing today? Like, what are you doing this week to
Yeah.
get there? I think those are the big things. And I think the other thing is like, and I already said in this when we were talking, sport, the whole slogan, sports don't build character, they reveal it. Like, like with your athletes, like if you let them have substandard character, it's going to get revealed at some point. I have coached athletes who don't have great character and are so incredibly talented that they have a lot of success anyways in
Yeah.
high school sports, but it does catch up with them all. It catches up with them all eventually. At some level, it catches up with them, and it catches up with them in other parts of their life. I think with coaching, like, it's just like, what can you do today to make your athletes better athletes, but and also better people? And you're not going to change the world in one day, right? It's just those little things chipping away each day. And that's how you get in any sport. That's how you get the athletes to where they want to get in the long run.
Yeah. That was a great answer. And this was a really fun conversation. I could end up talking to you for hours about this. But we will end it now. And I just want to thank you for your time. I feel like your story is really important, where you came from, what your journey is like, and then what you're doing now. So that was really cool to listen to everything. If anybody wants to find out when these episodes are released, you can go to my website, which is riannaposkin.com, and you can find out all kinds of youth sport information there. So thank you so much, Fred, for joining me.
For sure. Anytime. This was fun. I normally go on podcasts and talk about other people. I've never talked about myself on one before. So
this was great.
Fun.
Yeah, turn the camera absolutely. On you.
Yeah.
All right. We'll sign off for now. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.